Hello, friend. Have you ever wondered how the very first farmers lived their quiet lives? How small human groups slowly learned to grow food, build villages, and change the future of humanity forever, without even knowing it. If you often find it difficult to fall asleep at night, then this story is especially for you. Without saying much more, let us begin. And yes, if this story helps you even a little, please remember to like, subscribe, and don't forget to comment below telling us where you are watching from. Life before farming, long before fields were shaped by human hands, before seeds were pressed gently into the soil and patiently awaited. Human life moved in a slower, wandering rhythm. People lived close to the earth, not owning it, not changing it, but listening to it. The land decided where they would go, when they would stay, and when it was time to move again. Life flowed softly, guided by sunrise and sunset, hunger and rest, warmth and cold. Small groups traveled together, never too large, never too loud. They followed animals across open plains and through quiet forests, learning the paths of deer and wild cattle, reading broken grass and bent branches like silent stories written on the ground. They knew which berries were safe, which roots eased hunger, and which leaves healed wounds. Knowledge lived in memory, passed slowly from one generation to the next, through watching, through doing, through living. At night, fire became the heart of their world. Flames flickered gently, pushing back darkness and fear. Around the fire, people rested without hurry. Tools were repaired, food was shared, and tired bodies leaned toward warmth. The fire crackled softly, sparks drifting upward like tiny stars, while the real stars waited patiently above, spread wide across the dark sky. Sleep came early and naturally. There was no reason to stay awake once the fire burned low. The world itself seemed to invite rest. Wind moved through grass with a slow whisper. Insects sang their endless, calming songs. The earth felt steady beneath tired feet, reliable and familiar. Days followed a gentle pattern. When the sun rose, people moved. When it grew hot, they rested in shade. When the light faded, they returned to fire and quiet voices. There were no clocks, no measured hours, only the feeling of time passing like water in a calm river. Nothing rushed them forward, nothing pulled them back. Food was gathered day by day. Some days were generous, filled with fruit, nuts, and successful hunts. Other days were lean, and hunger was accepted without anger. Life taught patience early. People learned that struggle passed, just as seasons did. Cold winters softened to spring. Dry land welcomed rain again. Loss and reward moved together, slowly, evenly. Children grew by watching. They followed elders silently, copying their movements, learning where to step and where not to. Stories were not told in long speeches, but in simple actions repeated again and again. How to sharpen a stone, how to follow tracks, how to stay still and listen. Wisdom came quietly. There were no villages yet, no permanent homes, resting in one place. Shelters were simple and temporary, made from branches, animal skins, and whatever the land offered at that moment. When food became scarce, when weather shifted, when animals moved on, people packed what little they had and followed. Nothing tied them down, and everything guided them forward. Yet even in this wandering life, something gentle began to grow inside the human mind. A sense of observation deeper than survival. People noticed patterns. They noticed how certain plants returned year after year to the same places. They noticed how seeds spilled onto the ground sometimes grew into new plants. They noticed how animals followed predictable paths, how rivers rose and fell, how seasons returned without fail. These thoughts did not rush into action. They rested quietly, like ideas sleeping beneath the surface. For many generations, nothing changed. Life continued as it always had, balanced and fragile, simple and demanding. People belonged to nature completely, without separation, without control. As night fell again and again, fires burned low. Bodies rested close together for warmth. Breathing slowed. Eyes closed beneath open skies. Above them, stars moved in ancient patterns, unchanged, watching silently as humanity drifted toward a future it could not yet imagine. This was the world before farming, a world of movement, patience, and deep listening, a world where humans survived by understanding, not shaping the land. A quiet beginning, steady and calm, laying unseen foundations for a transformation that would one day change everything. slowly, gently, like the first light of dawn spreading across a sleeping earth. Change did not arrive suddenly. It did not announce itself with noise or urgency. It came quietly, almost unnoticed, drifting into human awareness over many lifetimes. The wandering rhythm of life continued as it always had, yet beneath the surface, small thoughts began to settle, gentle and persistent, like dust slowly gathering on still ground. As people moved through familiar landscapes year after year, they began to notice details that once felt unimportant. Certain plants appeared again and again in the same places. After the rains, green shoots returned where seeds had fallen before. When fruits dropped and were forgotten, new life sometimes emerged from the soil. These moments were not celebrated or recorded. They were simply observed, stored quietly in memory. There was no clear moment of realization, no single person who suddenly understood what this meant. Instead, knowledge formed slowly, shaped by repetition. A group might camp near a river bend one season, then return many seasons later to find the same edible plants waiting for them. The land seemed to remember, and humans began to wonder why. Hands that once only gathered now lingered. Fingers brushed the soil, feeling its softness after rain, its hardness during dry days. People noticed that some ground welcomed plants more easily than others. Dark soil felt richer. Wet earth held promise. These observations stayed gentle, never urgent, blending into daily life without demand. Women and men, elders and children, all carried pieces of this growing awareness. Seeds stuck to animal skins. Seeds spilled from baskets. Seeds were thrown aside with no intention at all. And sometimes, weeks later, green life appeared where none had been before. No effort, no planning, just time and earth working together. Life remained uncertain. Hunger still came. Weather still changed without warning. Yet the idea that food might return, that it might be encouraged rather than chased, slowly took shape. It was not yet farming. It was curiosity resting beside survival. Some groups began to linger longer in places where food felt reliable. They did not abandon movement, but they paused. Camps lasted days instead of nights. Fires burned longer. Shelters stood a little stronger. These pauses allowed more noticing, more quiet watching of how the land behaved when humans stayed close. People learned patience in new ways. Hunting required speed and alertness. Gathering required memory and care. But waiting for plants required something different. Waiting required trust. Trust that time would bring results. Trust that effort now might mean food later. There were failures, many of them. Seeds planted carelessly did not grow. Animals trampled fragile shoots. Dry seasons erased all hope. Yet failure did not stop the process. It softened at each failure, told quietly, without words. Children grew up watching adults return to the same places. They learned which plants were valued, which seeds were saved, which spots were worth revisiting. These lessons were never spoken aloud as rules. They lived in habit, in routine, in silent repetition. Tools slowly changed to digging sticks became more common, not just for roots, but for loosening soil. Baskets were woven tighter, stronger, able to carry seeds without spilling. Storage became a quiet idea, still rare, still uncertain, but present. Time itself began to feel different. Seasons mattered more. Rain was no longer just relief from heat, but a promise. Dry days carried worry. The sky gained importance. Clouds were watched. Winds were noticed. Nature had always been powerful, but now it felt responsive, as if it might answer human patience with reward. At night, fires burned while people spoke softly. If they spoke at all, thoughts moved slowly. Minds rested on the idea of returning, of waiting, of staying just a little longer. Sleep came with questions drifting gently through dreams. Questions without words, without answers, yet no villages existed. No fences marked land. Nothing was owned. But attachment had begun. Attachment to place. Attachment to possibility. The land was no longer only something passed through. It was becoming something remembered. Generations passed this way. The change was so slow that no one noticed it happening. Each generation believed they lived as their parents had lived, yet each carried small differences. A little more waiting, a little more returning, a little more care for where seeds fell. The first seeds of change were not only plants, they were thoughts about time, about patience, about future days not yet lived. These thoughts settled deeply, growing roots beneath the surface of human life. Still, nights remained quiet. Stars remained distant. Fires burned low. Bodies rested after long days. The world did not yet look different, but it felt different. Something had begun, softly, silently, like a seed resting underground, unseen, preparing for a future that would reshape the human story in ways no one could yet imagine. And so life continued, balanced between movement and pause, between hunger and hope, between old rhythms and new possibilities. The land waited. Humanity waited too, breathing slowly, dreaming gently, as the first true steps toward farming rested just beyond the edge of awareness, patient and inevitable. The birth of farming. Farming did not begin as a decision. It began as a feeling, a quiet sense that staying a little longer might be worth the wait. The land, once only a place to pass through, slowly became a place to return to again and again, until return itself became a kind of staying. Groups began to choose familiar valleys and riverbanks, places where water moved gently and soil felt soft beneath bare feet. These places offered comfort without promise, and promise without certainty. People did not yet think of harvests or ownership. They thought only of survival made slightly easier, of hunger delayed, of effort rewarded just enough to be noticed. Seeds were no longer only accidents. Some were dropped with intention, pressed lightly into earth with careful hands. Digging sticks loosened soil in small patches, not fields, just quiet spaces where hope rested. There was no rush. The work was slow and thoughtful, done between other tasks, woven gently into daily life. At first, the changes were small. A few plants grew taller where seeds had been placed. Some survived longer. Some produced more food than those growing wild. People noticed, not with excitement, but with calm curiosity. Success did not feel dramatic. It felt natural, as if this had always been possible and was simply being remembered. The rhythm of days began to shift. Movement still existed, but it shortened. Camps were revisited more often. Paths became familiar. Fires were lit in the same places. Footprints overlapped with older footprints, pressed into soil again and again until the ground itself seemed shaped by memory. Waiting became part of work. After planting came patience. After patience came watching. People learned to protect fragile growth, gently moving stones, discouraging animals, adjusting habits to give plants time. This care did not feel like control. It felt like cooperation. Rain gained new meaning. Each drop softened soil and lifted hope. Dry days felt heavier now, not just uncomfortable, but worrying. People began to look to the sky more often, measuring time not only by hunger and rest, but by clouds and seasons. Tools evolved slowly. Stone blades were sharpened differently. Sickles took shape from bone and flint, able to cut grasses cleanly. Storage pits appeared, shallow at first, lined with leaves or clay, holding grain through quiet months. Food no longer needed to be found every day. Some could be saved. Some could wait. With waiting came planning, and with planning came a subtle sense of future. People began to think not only of tomorrow, but of weeks ahead, of seasons turning. Life stretched forward in the mind, creating space for intention. Not every attempt succeeded. Floods destroyed young plants. Cold winds burned shoots. Insects fed freely. Loss remained a teacher, but loss no longer erased effort completely. Enough survived, often enough for learning to continue. Children grew up surrounded by these small changes. They watched elders tend plants as naturally as they once watched them hunt. They learned which seeds mattered, which places held promise, which seasons demanded care. Farming became part of growing up, not as a rule, but as an expectation quietly fulfilled. Movement still existed. People had not yet settled fully, but something new had rooted them. A bond to land formed not through ownership, but through familiarity. This soil had been touched. This ground had been waited on. This place remembered them. As food became more predictable, daily life softened slightly. There was more time to shape tools more carefully, time to rest, time to observe. Time to sit quietly and watch fields respond to effort. Evenings felt different now. Fires burned near planted areas. People rested while looking at growth, still invisible beneath soil. Sleep came with anticipation rather than uncertainty. Dreams carried images of green shoots and gentle rain. Farming did not erase the old life. Hunting and gathering continued, but it added something new, something steady. It tied human rhythm to earth more deeply than before. The land was no longer only a provider. It became a partner in survival. Generations passed, each one stepping a little further into this new way of living. Fields expanded slowly. Knowledge deepened. What began as curiosity became practice. What began as waiting became tradition. The birth of farming was quiet and patient, shaped by countless hands across countless years. It did not feel like change to those living it. It felt like life unfolding naturally, one season at a time. And beneath open skies, beside softly growing fields, humanity settled into a new rhythm, one that would carry villages, civilizations, and histories yet to come, all rooted in these early moments of care, patience, and trust in the earth. Animals become companions. Long before animals were counted, named, or fenced, they were simply part of the shared world. Humans watched them closely, just as they watched clouds and rivers. Animals moved with purpose, following paths shaped by instinct and memory. They knew where water waited, where grass grew thick, where shelter could be found. For a long time, humans followed them, learning quietly, trusting their movements. Among all creatures, some stayed closer than others. Wolves lingered at the edges of camps, drawn by warmth, scraps of food, and the soft glow of fire. They did not approach boldly. They waited. Humans noticed their presence, not with fear, but with recognition. These animals understood the night. They understood danger. Over time, distance shortened. Glances turned into tolerance. Tolerance became familiarity. The first partnerships were not planned. They grew from calm acceptance. Wolves that stayed near camps warned of approaching threats. Humans left food without intention, without expectation. Slowly, trust formed. Over generations, bodies changed. Voices soft. The first dogs emerged, not as tools, but as companions shaped by shared survival. Other animals followed different paths. Goats and sheep moved in predictable ways. They returned to familiar grazing grounds. They followed leaders. Humans noticed how easily they could be guided, how calmly they accepted human presence. Young animals were captured not for immediate use, but for later. They were kept close, fed, watched, protected. At first, animals were not owned. They were simply kept nearby, tied loosely, watched gently, given shelter during cold nights. The idea was not controlled, but convenience. Animals provided milk, warmth, and steady presence. They moved with humans, just as humans once moved with them. Cattle followed slowly, larger, stronger, calmer than wild prey. They required patience and space. Humans learned to walk beside them, not chase them, to guide rather than frighten. These animals became move-in stores of food and labor, though no one yet thought of them in those terms. They were simply valuable because they stayed. Daily life adjusted quietly. Camps were arranged to include animals. Fires burned near resting herds. Children grew up surrounded by soft sounds of breathing, hooves shifting in dust. Gentle calls exchanged between humans and animals. Sleep felt safer. The night felt less empty. Animals changed human rhythm. Morning began with feeding and checking. Evening ended with gathering and calming. The day now included care, responsibility, routine. These routines brought structure without urgency, anchoring people more firmly to place. Waste found new purpose. Scraps fed animals. Animal droppings enriched soil. Cycles formed naturally, without understanding, without planning. Everything became connected in quiet ways. With animals came new skills. Ropes were woven stronger. Pens were built simple and temporary. Knowledge grew slowly, carried in habit rather than words. Which animals needed shade, which needed water first, which became restless before storms. Not all animals accepted this. Closeness many resisted. Many escaped. Loss remained part of learning, but enough stayed. Enough adapted. Enough responded to care. Animals also changed emotion. Companionship softened isolation. Watching animals rest brought calm. Listening to their steady presence through the night eased fear. The world felt shared, less vast, less empty. Over generations, animals became part of identity. Certain groups became known by the animals they kept. Stories formed quietly. Respect grew. Animals were no longer only hunted. They were lived with. This relationship did not remove hardship. Disease spread. Food shortages affected animals too, but shared struggle deepened connection. Survival became mutual. As farming slowly expanded, animals supported it. They grazed fields after harvest. They carried loads. They pulled simple tools without intention, without design. They became partners in shaping the land. The bond between humans and animals formed gently, rooted in patience, observation, and trust. It did not change life overnight. It settled into it, steady and reliable. At night, fires burned low as animals rested nearby. Breathing slowed across species. Stars watched silently as humans and animals slept within shared space, bound together by quiet cooperation. This closeness marked another step away from wandering life, another thread tying humanity to place, routine, and future. Not through force, but through companionship, shaping a world where survival was no longer faced alone, but shared calmly and patiently across many gentle generations. From camps to villages, the shift did not feel like settling down. It felt like returning to the same river bend, the same open clearing, the same stretch of land where fire pits already waited, where footprints from past seasons still softened the soil. Each return lasted a little longer than the last, until staying no longer felt temporary. Camps began to repeat themselves. Shelters were rebuilt in familiar shapes, in familiar places. Poles leaned against the same trees. Stones circled fires where ash already rested beneath the surface. Nothing permanent was intended, yet permanence slowly arrived on its own. With farming and animals nearby, movement became less necessary. Food no longer demanded constant travel. Water was close. The land provided enough to allow patience. People began to measure distance not by how far they traveled, but by how far they needed to go. Life gently folded inward. Shelters grew stronger. Branches were placed more carefully. Animal skins were layered thicker. Walls blocked wind more effectively. Floors were cleared of stones. These changes were small, practical, and quiet, but together they shaped a new way of living. Time felt different in these places. Mornings began in the same space. Evenings ended where they began. The sun rose and set over familiar outlines. Shadows moved across the same ground day after day. Memory gathered in layers. Children grew up knowing one place well. They learned where the ground dipped, where water pooled after rain, where insects gathered at dusk. Their world felt smaller, but deeper. Safety grew from familiarity. Villagers were not planned. They formed when multiple families chose the same place. Shared work encouraged shared space. Fields were nearby. Animals rested close. Fires multiplied. Paths formed naturally between shelters, worn smooth by many feet. No one claimed land. There were no boundaries, no walls, no ownership, yet connection formed. This place mattered. It held effort, time, and hope. Leaving it felt heavier than before. Daily life gained rhythm. Tasks repeated, feeding animals, tending plants, repairing shelters. Each task returned again and again, creating a steady pattern. Work did not feel endless. It felt predictable. With predictability came rest. Moments appeared between tasks. Time to sit. Time to watch children play. Time to observe smoke rise slowly into still air. Silence grew comfortable. Villages brought closeness. People lived nearer to one another. Sounds traveled easily. Laughter, footsteps, quiet conversations drifted through open spaces. Privacy softened, replaced by shared awareness. This closeness changed relationships. Cooperation became essential. Shared tools were repaired together. Food was divided carefully. Disagreements arose, but they were resolved quietly, guided by the need to continue living side by side. Elders gained importance. Their memory held knowledge of seasons, floods, failures, and successes. They guided not through authority, but through experience. Their presence anchored the village to its past. Night in a village felt different from night in a camp. Fires glowed in multiple places. Animals rested nearby. The darkness felt less deep. Safety came not only from fire, but from community. Sleep settled gently. Breathing synchronized. The village rested as one body, held together by shared effort and quiet trust. Villages did not end wandering entirely. Some people still traveled. Some seasons required movement. But the center had shifted. Home now existed, not as an object, but as a feeling tied to place. This shift carried consequences unseen at the time. Population slowly increased. Knowledge deepened. Traditions began to form. Life grew more complex, yet also more stable. From simple camps, villages emerged, shaped by patience rather than planning. They marked a turning point not felt as change, but as comfort. A steady pause in humanity's long journey when movement slowed enough for roots to grow. Under open skies and beside softly worked land, humans began to live, not just with nature, but within a place they would come to call their own. Quietly, gently, one shared day at a time. Homes made of earth and straw, with villages forming along riverbanks, gentle hills, and open plains. Humans began to understand permanence in small, quiet ways. Shelters were no longer simple, temporary constructions. They evolved slowly, shaped by patience, observation, and the steady rhythm of daily life. Each layer of mud, each bundle of straw, each carefully placed branch reflected hours of care, thought, and practice, though no one spoke of it as art or design. It was simply life, unfolding naturally, gently, without rush. People learned to gather materials from their surroundings with awareness. Clay was dug carefully from riverbeds, softened with water, and molded with hands hardened by generations of labor. Straw was collected from fields, woven into walls, roofs, and mats. Stone provided support where needed, and wood formed doors, posts, and frames. Each home was a collaboration between humans and earth, between time and labor, quiet but enduring. The shapes of homes were simple and practical. Circular huts often rose from compacted soil, their walls thick to hold warmth in cool nights and shield from wind and rain. Roofs were conical, sloping to let water slide away gently, keeping interiors dry and calm. Each hut felt connected to the ground, rooted firmly, as if it had grown from the soil itself rather than being constructed by human hands. Inside, life was calm and intentional. Small fires burned in hearths, providing warmth and light, but never dominating space. Smoke escaped through openings in roofs or walls, drifting slowly upward, carrying scents of cooking and herbs. Families moved around these fires with care, performing daily tasks in quiet coordination, the rhythm of life shaped by necessity, habit, and gentle observation. Floors were layered carefully. Mud mixed with straw hardened into smooth, forgiving surfaces. Mats woven from reeds or grasses softened steps and provided comfort for resting butt. Children learned early to respect these spaces, moving gently, learning where to sit, where to place tools, and how to store objects safely. Night brought a different kind of attention. Fires burned low, animals rested nearby. Darkness outside felt protective, as if the earth itself were holding the village in calm embrace. Humans slept deeply, bodies softened by warm floors and safe walls, breathing synchronized with quiet animals, with neighbors, with the rhythm of nature itself. Stars above stretched across the sky in endless constellations, silent witnesses to life below. Walls carried memory as well as function. Marks and Clay told stories of small events, a successful hunt, the birth of a child, a particularly good harvest. These marks were subtle, quiet, never spoken aloud, yet present. They connected the present with past days, grounding people in continuity, in calm reflection. Every home became a small archive of lived experience, etched into earth, straw, and careful labor. Water management emerged gradually. Clay-lined basins collected rain gently. Simple channels guided it toward gardens and away from living spaces. Each adjustment was small, intuitive, and slowly refined over years. Homes adapted naturally to environment, season, and human need. Each improvement arising from repeated observation, careful trial, and quiet reflection. Storage within homes was subtle but vital. Simple pits, woven baskets, and clay jars kept grains, seeds, and small tools safe. Each item had a place, and each place was respected. Care became habit, not rule, and this habit shaped life with gentle consistency. People learned patience in storing, in waiting for food to ripen, for seeds to sprout, for fire to settle after cooking. Life itself became measured in quiet intervals, in the rhythm of preparation and use. Neighbors shared knowledge, naturally. Skills passed from elder to child, from family to family, without ceremony or demand. Watching a roof being woven, a wall being plastered, a hearth being tended became instruction as much as action. Learning was immersed in daily life, as calm and gradual as sunrise. Homes encouraged community. Spaces between huts became paths, places for conversation, for shared work, for quiet observation of children and animals. Noise was soft and rhythmic, the shuffle of feet, gentle laughter, whispered guidance. Fires from nearby huts flickered softly, illuminating walls in warm, shifting light. Villages felt alive, yet peaceful, vibrant, yet calm. Seasons shaped homes too. Roofs were repaired before rains. Walls were patched before cold winds arrived. Each adjustment was a small act of care, repeated yearly, embedded in practice and memory. Life became a series of deliberate movements, mindful and unhurried, where every touch and placement mattered, yet carried no urgency. Through these spaces, people felt anchored. Sleep deepened. Waking moments were structured without planning, guided by need, nature, and instinct. Home became more than shelter. It was a rhythm, a calm center in the larger flow of life. It offered continuity, safety, and quiet stability in a world that had once demanded constant movement. And so, as the first villages grew, homes rose gently from earth and straw, shaping life slowly, steadily, like rivers carving valleys over centuries. Each hut, each wall, each hearth was a quiet testament to patience, care, and the gentle unfolding of human life. Nights were calm, days purposeful, and life, though simple, was rich in subtle connection to land, to family, to community, and to the slow passage of time itself. A day in a Neolithic village. The village woke slowly, with the sun stretching its golden fingers across the horizon. Light touched the tops of huts first, spreading gently down walls of clay and straw. Shadows retreated quietly as the day began, not with urgency, but with a soft, patient rhythm that mirrored life itself. Sounds of movement were few, deliberate, gentle, the shuffle of feet on earthen floors, the soft clatter of tools being gathered, and the occasional low murmur of voices exchanged without haste, without pressure. Children rose with the light, stretching and blinking against the morning glow. They moved carefully around adults and animals, learning the rhythm of the village without being told. Every step, every action was observed and repeated, absorbed naturally. The smallest details mattered: where to place a basket, how to carry water without spilling, how to approach a fire safely. Observation was the primary teacher here, and curiosity the soft, quiet force that guided each day. The first task was often tending animals. Goats and sheep had already begun to stir, stretching limbs and nudging for attention. Humans approached slowly, speaking in low tones, coaxing movements without force. Milk was drawn gently, droppings cleared with care, animals guided toward pastures or sheltered spaces. Every gesture was calm, deliberate, a silent dialogue between human and creature. These small acts defined the pace of the morning, anchoring the day in patience and quiet attention. Fields were next. Even before the sun rose fully, some individuals moved toward planted areas, inspecting seedlings, checking soil, adjusting small supports, and removing weeds. Hands traced rows of green gently, as if greeting the earth itself. Water, carried in simple clay jars or woven baskets, nourished plants in careful, slow pours. Each motion was repeated with mindfulness, a meditation of care that allowed growth to continue without disturbance. Breakfast was modest, shared in quiet harmony. Porridge of early grains, sometimes sweetened with berries, provided nourishment. Food was prepared near the hearth, hands moving in practiced motions, grinding, stirring, lifting hot containers with care. The fire's warmth carried through the home, and its smoke drifted lazily upward, mingling with morning light. Eating together reinforced community, though conversation remained gentle, calm, not hurried or boisterous. Children joined the elders in simple tasks, often carrying small loads, gathering firewood, or practicing with tools. Mistakes were allowed. They were part of learning, part of the rhythm of life. Elders corrected quietly, demonstrated slowly, guiding without stress or pressure. Respect was shown in observation, in mimicry, in patience. By mid-morning, villagers moved outward. Some tended fields more extensively, hoeing, planting, or harvesting as seasons demanded. Others repaired shelters, mended tools, or prepared storage for future needs. Movements were coordinated without spoken instruction. The village functioned as a quiet, cohesive organism, each individual contributing in rhythm with others, guided by necessity and experience rather than force. Water remained central. Wells, streams, and small basins shaped movement, gathering points for conversation, observation, and teaching. While filling jars or washing leaves, small exchanges occurred. Guidance offered, stories shared, knowledge passed subtly from one to another. Learning was seamless, interwoven with activity, integrated into life without formalization or ceremony. Food preparation required continued attention. Dough was kneaded, seeds were ground into meal, fruits were cleaned and stored. Cooking fires remained gentle, flames low, smoke rising predictably. Meals were communal but unhurried, each bite savored quietly, each task a small meditation. Work and nourishment existed together, blending seamlessly into the daily flow. Afternoons carried a softer pace. Tasks shifted to maintenance, observation, and reflection. Children rested in shade or played quietly near the edges of communal areas. Adults performed small repairs on homes, fences, or tools. Time itself seemed to slow, stretching comfortably across the village as a gentle, measured presence. Observation of clouds, wind, and weather continued, guiding decisions naturally, without stress or alarm. Evening approached gradually. Shadows lengthened across earthen floors and open paths. Fires were rekindled, low flames illuminating faces and objects with warm, shifting light. The day's work was reviewed silently. Crops and animals, tools and shelters were assessed with careful attention, ensuring all was in order. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. Preparation for night occurred as a natural extension of the day. As night deepened, the village settled. Animals rested close to homes, breathing softly. Humans moved with deliberate care, performing final tasks quietly before yielding to sleep. Families clustered near fires or on earthen floors, bodies soft, minds calm, hearts synchronized with the gentle rhythm of life. The night itself seemed to participate in the village's routine, darkness spreading like a protective cloak, punctuated only by the steady, predictable sounds of breath, wind, and distant animals. Sleep came naturally, deeply, guided by familiarity and safety. The village, alive with quiet motion by day, transformed into a serene, resting organism by night. Fires smoldered low, embers glowing as guardians of warmth and comfort. Stars above mirrored the calm order below, steady and patient witnesses to human life unfolding in balance with nature. Each day repeated this rhythm, subtly and silently, yet never identically. Slight differences in weather, plant growth, or animal behavior introduced gentle variation, keeping the mind attentive without urgency. Life in the Neolithic village was continuous, flowing, and calm, shaped by observation, patience, and quiet cooperation rather than rush or noise. Over time, the cumulative effect of such days brought a profound sense of stability. Humans began to understand the interplay of effort, observation, and time. They learned that growth required waiting, care, and attentiveness. They realized that life was not merely survival, but a measured dance, unfolding slowly, gently, with each individual contributing to a communal balance that made rest not only possible, but natural, inevitable, and comforting. In this village, each sunrise brought continuity, each task blended with the next, each night ended with security and calm. The world was vast, but within this small, living space, humans found a sense of home, of rhythm, and of a quiet order that carried forward generation by generation, shaping the future of life in ways unseen yet deeply felt. In the quiet rhythm of village life, tools became extensions of human thought and care. They were not born of urgency or invention alone, but from observation, patience, and the gentle repetition of daily needs. Every stone, every piece of wood, every bone carried potential. Hands that had once only gathered food now shaped it, smoothed it, sharpened it, and made it last. Life became a series of small acts, deliberate and calm, each shaping the world in soft, imperceptible ways. The first tools were simple. Stones with sharp edges were chosen carefully, held in hands accustomed to their weight, tested against roots, wood, and meat. The process was slow, quiet, almost meditative. Flint chipped gently under repeated strikes, creating edges precise enough to cut, carve, or scrape. Each success felt natural, a quiet confirmation of skill growing gradually over repeated effort. Wood was another partner. Branches, shaped by careful selection and minimal modification, became digging sticks, pestles, handles for cutting implements. Every curve of a branch was understood and respected. The process was patient. Breakage taught without anger. Replacement required observation, not haste. In the village, these tools were used, repaired, and passed down. Their value embedded not only in function but in the rhythm of life itself. Pottery arose from the same quiet attention. Clay gathered from riverbeds, kneaded and mixed with straw, became pliable under gentle hands. Simple vessels emerged slowly, shaped by touch rather than rush. Each coil of clay, each smoothing motion, was repeated until walls stood firm and symmetrical. Holding promise of storage, cooking, or carrying water, fires hardened to clay, soft heat turning soft mud into lasting containers, creating objects that were both functional and subtly beautiful, formed without hurry, without expectation, only care. Pottery and tools did more than serve daily needs. They shaped perception. Life became measured in acts of preparation, creation, and use. The making of a vessel was quiet study of proportions, balance, and patience. A sharp stone or smooth pot transformed the mundane into moments of reflection, embedding intention into daily labor. Children learned by observing these acts, imitating motions, feeling texture, understanding weight, and experiencing the slow satisfaction of completion. Simple crafts extended beyond the practical. Fibers were woven into mats, ropes, and small baskets. Animal hides were cleaned, softened, and fashioned into coverings, garments, and small tools. Every motion carried rhythm, repeated hundreds of times, embedding knowledge without words. Crafts were learned through watching, repetition, and gentle correction. Mistakes were absorbed quietly. Successes were unspokenly celebrated by the smooth function of objects, by the ease with which life continued. Tools and crafts shaped social life, shared techniques, encouraged observation, collaboration, and gentle teaching. Elders demonstrated methods for repairing pots or weaving fibers, guiding children through patient repetition. Knowledge was fluid, carried in actions rather than instructions, forming a continuum across generations. Every hut contained objects shaped by care, creating connections between past and present, between individual and community. Evening work slowed. Fires burned low, illuminating walls and workspaces with soft, flickering light. Hands worked steadily, repairing tools, finishing pottery, preparing materials for the next day. The quiet was punctuated only by soft conversation, laughter of children, or distant animal calls. Movement was gentle, purposeful, without urgency. These moments carried continuity, a subtle reinforcement of rhythm, routine, and presence. Tools enabled more than survival. They extended vision and capability. Stone blades opened pathways to diet expansion. Digging sticks brought roots to light. Pottery preserved food, water, and seeds, allowing planning beyond the immediate. Each simple object altered the relationship of time, granting foresight, patience, and gradual accumulation of knowledge. Life became more than reactive. It became anticipatory, measured, and intentional. Over years, techniques evolved naturally. Repeated observation led to refinements, sharper edges, stronger joints, more resilient vessels. Tools were repaired, replaced, or discarded with minimal waste. Every action, every repetition reinforced skill, patience, and calm understanding of material and environment. Craft became a dialogue between human hands and natural resources, a gentle co-creation rooted in observation, care, and slow learning. Children's participation was seamless. Tasks were scaled to size and skill. Learning was immersive, embedded in the rhythm of daily work. Mistakes were part of mastery, failure simply another cycle in the patient unfolding of knowledge. By participating, children absorbed not only technique, but the quiet philosophy of life, that care, observation, and repetition yielded sustainable, enduring results. Life became a continuous classroom, unspoken yet profound. As night fell, villages were quieted by the soft glow of dying fires. Tools rested, clay-hardened fibers slept in bundles, humans rested in their homes, animals nearby. The village itself paused in a calm, deliberate rhythm, breath synchronized across species and structures. Sleep became natural, a continuation of the day-seasonal flow. Tomorrow would bring repetition, refinement, and the slow deepening of skills that sustain life and bound community. Through these small, deliberate act-shaping stones, forming clay, weaving fibers, humans began to understand permanence, consequence, and care. Tools and crafts were not mere objects. They were reflections of rhythm, patience, and connection. In creating them, humans shaped both the world and themselves, laying quiet foundations for villages, civilizations, and generations yet to come, all unfolding gently, steadily, within the calming cadence of daily life. Even in the quiet rhythm of daily work, humans notice things beyond the immediate necessities of food, shelter, and survival. Shadows of clouds, patterns of stars, the changing face of the moon, the behavior of animals, they all carried a subtle sense of meaning. Life in villages was rooted in routine and care, but in the spaces between tasks, in the pauses created by observation and patience, humans began to notice mystery. And from mystery, the first glimmers of rituals slowly emerged. Rituals were not grand spectacles. They were quiet acts, shaped by repetition, careful attention, and shared understanding. Certain fires were attended with extra care, not merely for warmth or cooking, but for the soft comfort of light and the gentle, contemplative glow they cast. Stones or marks were arranged in small, circular patterns, often near water or in clearings, places where light shifted and shadows fell softly across the earth. These arrangements were not formalized with words, but recognized collectively as special, meaningful. Children learned their significance not through instruction, but through silent participation, repetition, and the calm, observant presence of elders. Beliefs emerged slowly, intertwined with observation of natural cycles. Seasons returned predictably. Rivers rose and fell. Plants sprouted and died. Animals followed the patterns of sun, rain, and wind. Humans noticed these cycles and imagined them as forces with intention. Thought became careful, reflective, forming the earliest understanding that life was shaped not only by effort, but by larger unseen rhythms. These rhythms inspired quiet reverence. They suggested presence beyond the immediate, guiding careful attention to the world and fostering a sense of connection to it. Ceremonies began subtly, embedded in daily life. Harvest brought gratitude expressed through offerings of food placed gently in special spots, sometimes covered with leaves, sometimes left near fires, always handled with care. Births, deaths, and the passage of seasons each created small, private rituals. Speech was soft, gestures deliberate, silence meaningful. These moments did not disrupt the rhythm of life. They were woven into it, calm and patient, teaching, reflection, continuity, and shared understanding. Symbols and marks began to appear on walls, stones, and simple objects. These were not yet writing, but they carried memory. Patterns, scratches, and small carvings represented events, observations, or feelings too subtle for speech. They reminded humans of cycles, relationships, and experiences. That presence in homes and communal spaces lent depth to everyday life, grounding routine and meaning beyond the immediate, and providing quiet lessons for children growing up in these spaces. Stories, too, were subtle. They were not yet performed in structured gatherings, but emerged in soft, oral exchanges during moments of shared work or rest. The hunt, the harvest, the return of animals all became gently retold in fragments, in phrases, in repetition. Children absorbed them, connecting events, actions, and consequences without formal instruction. The stories shaped understanding, connecting daily work with larger truths and reminding the community of collective memory. Storytelling was quiet, rhythmic, and calming, like the gentle flow of a river, reinforcing continuity and reflection. Sacred spaces emerged naturally. Small groves, riverbanks, hilltops, or clusters of stones were respected, left undisturbed, or revisited during quiet reflection. Humans did not yet think in terms of ownership or dominion, but in terms of reverence and care. These places provided stillness, allowing observation, contemplation, and communion with the patterns of the world. Their significance was understood through repeated visits, gentle attention, and the quiet presence of the community over time. Music and sound played a subtle role in these early rituals. Simple instrument stones struck together, hollowed wood tapped lightly. Reeds blown softly produced rhythms that accompanied work, rest, or reflection. These rhythms were slow, calming, and meditative, echoing the natural sounds of wind, water, and animal calls. Sound became a tool for focusing attention, marking transitions in day and night, and connecting humans with both each other and the world around them. Humans began to recognize cycles of life as sacred without defining them explicitly. Birth, growth, decline, and renewal were observed carefully. Each required attention, patience, and respect. Actions were taken to align with these rhythms, planting after rains, tending animals according to their needs, pausing at seasonal milestones. Respect for these cycles created order, calm, and predictability, anchoring villages in quiet, shared understanding. Evening rituals were subtle but powerful. Fires were tended, meals sometimes left for animals or spirits, and soft attention was given to the land, the animals, and each other. Breathing slowed, movements softened, and communities settled into night with the knowledge that their presence, care, and patience were part of a larger pattern. Sleep came naturally, guided by these small, shared observances. Through these emerging rituals and beliefs, humans began to perceive themselves not only as participants in daily survival, but as part of a wider, interconnected world. Life in the village was not only practical, it became reflective, mindful, and patient. Every day's work, every observation, every quiet gesture of care became imbued with meaning, subtly teaching connection, responsibility, and reverence. Over generations, these early forms of ritual belief and observation laid the groundwork for larger, more structured systems of spirituality. They reinforced community cohesion, provided continuity, and nurtured a patient understanding of the world. Villages grew not only as centers of survival, but as spaces where humans learned to move gently, live deliberately, and perceive the sacred in the quiet, measured rhythm of life itself. Trade, exchange, and early networks. Life in the village remained calm and deliberate, yet slowly, patterns of connection began to extend beyond the immediate settlement. Villages were small, self-sufficient, and rooted in the gentle rhythm of daily labor. But humans began to notice differences beyond their own home. Certain stones were sharper elsewhere, certain clay felt smoother, certain seeds grew better in distant soils. The first seeds of exchange appeared quietly, without ceremony, without urgency, carried forward by observation, need, and patient curiosity. Trade began simply. A chavla would arrive from a neighboring village, carrying objects unfamiliar to the local community, perhaps a differently shaped tool, a polished stone, or seeds unknown to the land near the village. The visitor would offer these objects in exchange for items that were familiar, practical, or abundant locally. Nothing was demanded. No formal agreements existed. The exchange was subtle, guided by calm, observation, mutual respect, and an intuitive understanding of value. Items exchanged were often small but significant. A handful of seeds could mean new crops in the coming season. A tool could make work easier or more efficient. Polished stones or rare shells became markers of attention and care, objects that carried both utility and subtle beauty. Their passage from one group to another was deliberate and slow, ensuring that value was recognized and preserved. These early networks required trust. Travelers were observed carefully. Their gestures, speech, and actions were studied quietly. Patience was essential, for hasty interactions could result in loss, misunderstanding, or disruption. Over time, trust built slowly. Certain families, certain individuals became known for fairness, calm demeanor, and consistency. Reputation became as important as the objects themselves. Exchange shaped rhythm and movement. Villagers began to prepare items for travelers, knowing that seasons or cycles might bring visitors. Pathways between settlements became familiar, trodden gently and repeatedly, creating natural routes of connection. Journeys were taken not for conquest or urgency, but with patience, care, and respect for the landscape. Observation guided travel as much as purpose. Travelers noted streams, hills, resting places, and hazards, sharing these silently with those they visited or hosting others in turn. Through trade, ideas traveled as well as objects. Stories, small techniques, new methods of crafting, or agricultural insights passed quietly between communities. Observation and imitation allowed knowledge to spread. Innovations were absorbed gently, tested slowly, and integrated with care into existing practices. Change was incremental, never abrupt. Each village adapted lessons from neighbors at its own pace, preserving rhythm and balance while expanding understanding. Children witnessed this carefully regulated interaction. They learned not only the practicalities of trade, what to offer, how to carry objects, how to present goods, but also the subtler lessons of patience, observation, and respect. They saw that the world beyond their village was vast yet navigable, that connections required calm attention, and that relationships, like plants and animals, needed time and care to grow. Trade influenced perception of abundance. Items once considered ordinary became precious in different contexts. Seeds, tools, and crafted objects were recognized for utility, rarity, or quality. Humans learned that value was not absolute, but relational, shaped by need, scarcity, and careful observation. These insights deepened understanding, subtly altering behavior and perspective over time. Seasonal movements intensified the practice. Villages began to align exchanges with cycles of growth, harvest, or animal migration. Patterns of timing emerged naturally, ensuring that exchanges were beneficial and sustainable. Observation of the world guided planning without urgency. Humans learned to anticipate needs and opportunities patiently, developing foresight grounded in careful attention rather than force or haste. The rhythm of village life accommodated visitors with ease. Shelters were extended when necessary. Fires were shared, meals offered, animals guided gently to avoid conflict. Hospitality was quiet, deliberate, and integrated into daily routine. Visitors were respected as part of a larger pattern, not as outsiders to be managed or controlled. This mutual respect strengthened bonds across communities. Over generations, networks grew subtly. Villages that traded repeatedly with one another became connected in complex, invisible webs of exchange. Knowledge, materials, and techniques moved along these networks, spreading slowly, patiently, and sustainably. Each interaction reinforced calm, understanding, trust, and rhythm, weaving a tapestry of connection across the landscape without disrupting the quiet flow of village life. By linking settlements, early trade created a foundation for future growth. Humans learned to recognize opportunity, to value patience, and to understand that cooperation could enhance survival without requiring haste or conflict. Life in villages remained deliberate, reflective, and rooted in observation. Yet these expanding connections brought the promise of new ideas, resources, and relationships, quietly shaping the trajectory of human life over generations. Evenings in villages were enriched by these interactions. Returning travelers shared news and objects, quiet conversation flowed by the fire, and knowledge of distant places extended the imagination without urgency. Sleep came easily, resting bodies and minds that had engaged in patient observation, careful exchange, and subtle collaboration. The village rested as a living organism, strengthened by networks that extended beyond its boundaries, embedding continuity, foresight, and calm anticipation into the pulse of daily life. The growth of community and social roles. As villages expanded, so too did the complexity of human relationships within them. Life remained rooted in calm rhythms. Yet the increasing number of people required subtle structures to maintain order, cooperation, and shared understanding. Social roles began to emerge not through strict rules, but through observation, aptitude, and gentle repetition. Humans learned that cooperation, patience, and awareness of each other's skills created stability in daily life, allowing survival to continue harmoniously. Elders, whose memories stretched across decades, naturally assumed guidance roles. They remembered which seasons brought floods, which seeds thrived in certain soils, and which animals were most reliable. Their knowledge was shared softly through demonstration rather than direct instruction. Children absorbed these lessons by watching daily routines, learning the rhythms of work, care, and observation without formal schooling. Wisdom was embedded in action, not words, and respect followed naturally, flowing quietly into every interaction. Adults gradually assumed specialized roles based on skill and inclination. Some focused on tending fields, learning the subtleties of planting, watering, and harvesting. Others specialized in caring for animals, understanding behavior, diet, and health. Skilled individuals shaped tools, repaired shelters, or crafted pottery. Roles were fluid, overlapping, and adaptive. Yet each person's contribution mattered, reinforcing the sense of purpose and calm order within the village. Work became collaborative, even when individual responsibility existed. Planting, harvesting, or construction often involved multiple hands, guided by unspoken rhythm. Movements were coordinated naturally. The flow of labor was slow and deliberate, ensuring minimal disruption, maximum care, and sustained output. Patience was a shared value, embedded in every task, every interaction, every moment of observation and practice. Children observed not only labor, but social dynamics. They noticed how elders mediated disputes gently, how adults communicated through subtle gestures, and how cooperation maintained the balance of the village. Learning empathy, patience, and social awareness was as crucial as learning to wield a tool or tend a field. Every act, however small, carried lessons in harmony, timing, and mutual respect. Community decisions were made collectively in ways subtle and unheard. Paths were chosen, communal projects planned, and resources allocated based on quiet observation and agreement. Voice mattered, but persuasion came through calm demonstration rather than shouting or force. Each choice reinforced the rhythm of village life, maintaining balance while allowing adaptability. Conflicts were resolved through mediation, discussion, and patience rather than aggression or haste. Shared responsibilities extended to maintaining the physical and social environment, cleaning common spaces, reinforcing structures, tending communal fires, and caring for shared resources were tasks distributed naturally among adults and older children. Observation, habit, and gentle guidance ensured that no one person carried burden alone, and that every action contributed to collective well-being. Cooperation became instinctual, rooted in daily practice rather than formal rule. Ritual and reflection reinforced social cohesion. Seasonal festivals, quiet observances of planting or harvest, and small ceremonies for births or deaths created predictable patterns that reinforced unity. These events were calm, deliberate, and deeply tied to daily life. Participation was natural, learned through observation and repetition rather than enforced. They provided context for work, connection, and understanding of place in the natural and social world. Knowledge continued to accumulate through practice. Techniques for planting, harvesting, weaving, pottery, and animal care improved slowly as individuals refined skill through patient repetition. Observing, imitating, and experimenting formed a cycle of growth that was deliberate and deeply integrated into daily life. Children absorbed skills gradually, understanding their purpose, their rhythm, and their connection to survival and continuity. Gender roles began to appear subtly, guided by task, suitability, and preference rather than strict enforcement. Women and men often performed complementary duties, yet fluidity allowed adaptation to circumstances. Skill and patience mattered more than assumption. Labor was organized to support survival, but not at the cost of continuity or balance. Observation remained the primary tool of instruction and adaptation. Elders maintained narrative continuity. Stories of ancestors, seasonal cycles, migrations, and observations of animals and weather shaped collective memory. These stories, quietly shared around evening fires or during routine work, reinforced lessons, warned of dangers, and celebrated successes. They shaped understanding, patience, and connection without formal writing, creating a living archive embedded in action and memory. Evenings became communal moments of reflection and connection. Fires glowed in multiple huts, shadows dancing across walls, voices quiet, movements deliberate. Tasks were finished, animals settled, children resting near elders or parents, sleep arrived gently, reinforced by the rhythm of cooperation. The calm assurance of shared understanding and the gentle hum of life sustained in balance. Over years, the cumulative effect of these social patterns strengthened the village. Roles were established naturally, skills refined, knowledge transmitted, and connections reinforced. Humans learned that survival depended not only on food, water, and shelter, but on calm cooperation, observation, patience, and respect. Life became measured, deliberate, and gentle, a harmonious balance between effort, reflection, and continuity. In this way, early villages grew not only physically, but socially and intellectually. Humans discovered the subtle art of living together, weaving routine, skill, knowledge, and care into every day. Community became both protection and guide, shaping the future of human life in ways that would endure quietly, steadily, and profoundly across generations. All unfolding in the measured, calm cadence of Neolithic existence. Harvest, preservation, and the cycle of food. In the gentle rhythm of village life, the turning of seasons was a quiet reminder of continuity, patience, and care. The arrival of harvest time brought activity, yet it was not hurried or frantic. The work was deliberate, synchronized with the cycles of earth, weather, and growth. Humans had learned to observe, to anticipate, and to act with careful timing, allowing the land to give its bounty fully and safely. The fields, once prepared with patient labor, now offered their reward in golden grains, ripe vegetables, and tender fruits. Morning began with the sun casting light across fields, illuminating the ripened crops. Hands moved methodically, touching each plant, assessing readiness, and harvesting with careful attention. The sound of blades cutting through stalks, of hands gathering and bundling, blended with birdsong and the soft rustle of leaves. Children joined in small ways, carrying bundles, separating grains, or learning to use simple tools. Every motion was quiet and considered part of a calm, unbroken rhythm that shaped the day. Harvesting was more than collecting food. It was an act of connection with the land, an understanding of cycles, and an exercise in patience. Too early, and the crops would be weak. Too late, and they risked spoiling. Observation guided timing, the color of grains, the pliability of stalks, the sound of seeds rattling in husks. Humans learned to read these subtle signs, their attention deepening with each passing season. Once collected, crops were prepared for preservation. Grains were threshed gently, husks separated, seeds dried in sunlit spaces, carefully turned to prevent clay jars, baskets, and pits lined with straw held the harvest, protecting it through months of waiting. Preservation was an exercise in foresight and patience, a quiet dialogue with the future. Each stored item carried potential, a promise of nourishment when the next season required it. Vegetables and fruits were treated similarly. Soft leaves were dried, roots buried in cool, shaded earth, berries stored in woven containers. Every method reflected observation of natural processes, temperature, moisture, and airflow, guided placement and handling. Preservation became both craft and knowledge, handed down through repetition, subtle instruction, and careful example. Children absorbed these lessons slowly, understanding not only the act itself, but its purpose, its rhythm, and its connection to survival. Food was distributed and shared with calm attention to balance and need. Families managed their own stores while contributing to communal reserves. Certain grains were set aside for planting, others for immediate use, some carefully saved for emergencies. Decision-making was deliberate, collective, and flexible, guided by experience, observation, and the natural ebb and flow of supply and demand. Sharing reinforced social bonds, trust, and cooperation. Evenings after harvest were quiet, reflective, and deeply satisfying. Fires glowed gently in huts and near storage pits, illuminating the textures of woven baskets, clay jars, and bundles of grain. Children played nearby, elders observed, adults repaired tools or organized stores. Conversation was soft, often instructional, but never hurried. Stories of successful harvests, lessons from failed crops, and reflections on weather patterns circulated naturally, creating continuity and collective memory. Animal husbandry intersected with food cycles. Livestock provided meat, milk, and labor, but also required care. Animals were fed, guided, and protected with attention to their needs and behaviors. Observation was constant, noting illness, growth, reproductive cycles, and interactions with humans. Milk was gathered with gentle care, ensuring health and consistency. Animals became integrated into the rhythm of daily life, their care entwined with preservation of food, time, and energy. Trade also played a subtle role in the cycle of food. Surplus grains or seeds could be exchanged with neighboring villages for items not locally available, such as different seeds, tools, or small luxury items. These exchanges were patient and deliberate, integrated naturally into village life. Traders were welcomed gently, their passage slow and considered, their interactions embedded in existing rhythms of observation and care. The repetition of these processes created expertise. Seasons repeated, skills refined, and knowledge accumulated slowly across generations. Villagers learned to anticipate whether manage storage, balance resources, and coordinate labor. Each year's cycle reinforced understanding, patience, and attentiveness, weaving continuity and stability into daily existence. Meals themselves were calm, reflective, and deliberate. Food was prepared with care over steady fires, using preserved grains, stored fruits, or freshly harvested vegetables. Sharing occurred quietly, reinforcing community bonds. Eating was both sustenance and meditation, a moment to appreciate effort, rhythm, and the connection between human labor and the earth's generosity. At night, the village rested in quiet security. Stored grains, well-tended animals, and carefully prepared food ensured comfort and continuity. Fires burned low, animals settled, and humans slept deeply, their bodies and minds aligned with the rhythm of the land and their own deliberate labor. Dreams were shaped by the day's work, reflecting understanding, memory, and gentle anticipation of the next cycle. Over generations, mastery of harvest and preservation became central to village stability. It allowed humans to plan beyond the immediate, to build routines that sustained life through lean seasons, and to cultivate patience as a guiding principle. This rhythm of planting, tending, harvesting, and storing became a foundation not only for survival, but for culture, observation, and reflection. The gentle cadence of food cycles shaped understanding, reinforced social bonds, and anchored humans to their environments in calm. Deliberate harmony, providing security, continuity, and quiet confidence in the enduring passage of time, the village, and the wider world. Life in the Neolithic village was quiet, measured, and deliberate. Yet the boundaries of human experience began to stretch beyond the familiar paths of daily routine. Villagers noticed subtle changes in the environment, heard tales from travelers, and observed differences in crops, tools, and techniques across neighboring settlements. Slowly, humans realized that the world extended beyond the horizon of their immediate home. Curiosity, patience, and careful observation guided early interactions with this wider reality, shaping a gentle expansion of knowledge and connection. Paths between villages emerged naturally, trodden by humans and animals over time. Streams, hills, and forest edges became markers and guides, silently directing movement. Travelers carried knowledge, tools, seeds, and stories, introducing subtle changes in the receiving community. Observing these arrivals became a lesson in patience, assessment, and trust. Villagers noted the behavior of visitors, the quality of goods they brought, and the rhythm of their journeys. Trust was cultivated slowly, reinforced through repeated calm interaction rather than rushed negotiation. Trade and exchange became central to early networks. Grains, seeds, crafted tools, and pottery passed between settlements, connecting individuals and families in quiet, dependable rhythms. Knowledge traveled as naturally as goods. Techniques for weaving, pottery shaping, tool making, or animal care spread through careful demonstration and observation. The village became a hub, connected to a broader pattern of human activity without formal organization, hierarchy, or urgency. Each exchange reinforced cooperation, patience, and mutual understanding. Observation remained essential. Villagers noticed that seeds from distant fields often thrived in new soil, that certain stones held sharper edges, or that particular woods lasted longer when shaped into tools. Such observations were shared subtly, teaching younger generations to recognize patterns, test results, and integrate new insights gradually. Knowledge moved like a gentle current, unnoticed yet powerful, shaping human capability and understanding. Journeys were deliberate and slow, guided by observation, preparation, and rhythm. Travelers monitored the land, noting weather, water sources, animal behavior, and plant growth. They learned paths carefully, moving with the environment rather than against it. Navigation relied on sun, stars, streams, and landmarks. Mistakes were observed, remembered, and discussed quietly, forming an oral map of the wider world that extended beyond any single village. Communication with other settlements was nuanced and intentional. Gestures, simple language, and objects conveyed meaning. Meetings occurred at natural crossroads, near rivers or clearings, where observation of surroundings ensured safety and coordination. Conversation was calm, measured, and deliberate, allowing information to pass effectively while respecting the rhythm of life. Humans learned that patience, attention, and quiet negotiation were as essential as any tool or resource. Children absorbed these wider patterns through participation and observation. They watched elders trade, share knowledge, and navigate the land. They carried messages, transported small goods, or assisted in preparation for visits from travelers. Learning was immersive, experiential, and slow, reinforcing understanding of social networks, geography, and resource management. These lessons laid foundations for future generations, shaping awareness of a world beyond immediate experience. Seasonal cycles dictated movement and interaction. Certain times of year favored travel, trade, or exchange. Rainfall, harvest, and animal migration guided timing. Villagers observed these cycles, integrating knowledge into preparation for journeys, storage of resources, and communal timing became intuitive, synchronized with natural patterns rather than imposed by urgency or external authority. Shared practices strengthened cohesion between villages. Similar techniques for farming, storage, toolmaking, and crafting created subtle continuity across settlements. Rituals and observances, though localized, shared common rhythms tied to planting, harvest, and the cycles of life. These shared patterns formed the early foundation of culture, connecting communities through repetition, observation, and deliberate attention. Evenings in the village remained gentle and reflective. Travelers rested near hearths, fires burned low, and stories of distant lands circulated quietly. Observation, reflection, and exchange combined to deepen understanding, reinforcing the connection between the immediate village and the broader world. Children listened attentively, learning not only facts but the rhythm, patience, and respect required for safe and meaningful engagement beyond home. Animals continued to shape interactions with the wider environment. Livestock required guidance when moving to distant pastures or being exchanged with neighboring communities. Observation of their behavior informed humans about terrain, climate, and subtle seasonal changes. Tracking, herding, and animal care developed alongside trade and exploration, integrating practical skills with the social and ecological knowledge necessary for survival and expansion. The cumulative effect of these subtle connections was profound. Villages became linked, not merely by goods, but by shared knowledge, observation, and experience. Each interaction reinforced patience, careful attention, and cooperative behavior. Humans began to understand that survival and growth depended not only on local skill and labor, but also on networks of trust, communication, and observation that spanned distances and generations. At night, the village rested with awareness of the wider world. Fires glowed low, the rhythmic breathing of humans and animals filled the air, and distant sounds of nature whispered across the landscape. Sleep was deep, calm, and restorative, anchored in the security of routine, the satisfaction of daily labor, and the confidence that knowledge and care extended beyond the village. In this way, early networks, trade, and observation quietly prepared humans for the complexities of larger communities, extended settlements, and interdependent societies. Life remained deliberate, calm, and rooted in daily rhythms. Yet each gentle step outward carried seeds of connection, foresight, and understanding, shaping a slow, patient expansion of human presence across the land. Through observation, care, and quiet interaction, humans began to perceive themselves not only as villagers, but as participants in a larger, interconnected world, laying the foundation for future exploration, cooperation, and growth, innovation, adaptation, and the continuity of life. As villages grew and life unfolded with quiet regularity, humans began to notice patterns, possibilities, and subtle improvements that could make survival easier, more efficient, and more harmonious. Innovation was not born of urgency or restlessness, but from observation, patience, and the gentle repetition of daily tasks. Every act of planting, tending, crafting, or observing carried within it the potential for adaptation, for improvement, for a small, quiet refinement that shaped the continuity of life. In fields, humans experimented with placement, spacing, and rotation of crops. Observation revealed which plants thrived together, which soil sections remained fertile, and which methods protected seeds from pests. These experiments were slow, deliberate, and repeated over seasons, allowing gradual learning. Mistakes were absorbed without panic. Successes were noted quietly and integrated naturally into routine. Children absorbed these lessons without formal instruction, watching elders, imitating movements, and internalizing patterns of careful adaptation. Tools evolved through necessity and attention. Stones were sharpened to better edges, shaped for specific tasks, and tested repeatedly. Wooden handles were modified to fit comfortably in hands to resist breakage and to guide motion smoothly. Bones, antlers, and shells were adapted to serve multiple purposes. Every refinement was gradual, subtle, and informed by patience, repetition, and careful observation. Tools became not just objects, but extensions of human thought and intention, reflecting a rhythm of labor, care, and continuity. Pottery, too, underwent refinement. Techniques for shaping, smoothing, and firing clay improved slowly. Designs became more stable, storage capacities more practical, and durability increased. Pottery vessels began to reflect both function and subtle aesthetic awareness. They allowed food, water, and seeds to be stored efficiently, supporting planning beyond immediate needs. Craftsmanship taught patience, attention to detail, and pride in creation. Children learned through touch, repetition, and quiet guidance, understanding the interplay of material, motion, and purpose. Animal care adapted as observation deepened. Humans noticed subtle patterns in behavior, diet, and reproduction. Herding techniques were refined, shelter placement adjusted, and feeding schedules attuned to seasonal variations. Health and growth were monitored carefully, and knowledge passed from one generation to the next with deliberate attention. Livestock became integrated partners in survival, their care shaping daily routine, social interaction, and rhythm of life. Communal structures evolved alongside individual skill. Shelters were reinforced, storage pits improved, and shared spaces organized to optimize safety and efficiency. Observing weather patterns, soil conditions, and animal movements allowed subtle changes to housing, layout, and resource management. Villagers adapted gradually, ensuring continuity while incorporating new knowledge. Each improvement was careful, measured, and embedded in the ongoing rhythm of life. Innovation extended to social life and communication. Rituals and beliefs adapted to circumstances, integrating new observations about seasons, celestial patterns, and environmental changes. Stories evolved, incorporating lessons from neighboring villages, travels, and subtle observation of natural phenomena. The collective memory of the community expanded gradually, reinforcing cooperation, patience, and awareness of larger patterns without abrupt disruption. Children learned not only skills, but also the philosophy underlying adaptation, observation, careful experimentation, and calm reflection became the guiding principles of growth. Mistakes were temporary, successes cumulative. The rhythm of life taught that patience, persistence, and attention yielded rewards, shaping behavior, cognition, and understanding of human agency in the environment. Trade and interaction with neighboring communities reinforced innovation. New seeds, tools, and techniques arrived slowly, introducing variation. Observation allowed humans to select which methods to adopt, which materials to replicate, and which practices to discard. The pace remained calm, deliberate, and reflective. Communities learned that integration required patience and care, ensuring harmony with existing routines and rhythms. Seasonal cycles guided adaptation, planting, harvesting, food storage, and animal care followed predictable patterns. Yet subtle variations demanded attentiveness. Changes in rainfall, temperature, or animal migration prompted minor adjustments in strategy. Villagers learned to respond flexibly without urgency, blending stability with gentle innovation. Each cycle reinforced knowledge, skill, and the patient understanding that life required both consistency and adjustment. Evening reflection became a subtle, important practice. Fires burned gently, shadows danced across walls, and quiet conversation passed between adults and children. Stories of the day's successes, lessons learned, and subtle observations were shared softly, reinforcing knowledge without urgency. Sleep followed naturally, minds and bodies aligned with the day's rhythm, ready for another cycle of careful observation, labor, and innovation. Over generations, these gradual improvements accumulated, transforming life quietly yet profoundly. Tools became sharper, shelters stronger, fields more productive, and social cohesion deeper. Humans learned to anticipate, observe, and integrate small changes with patience. The village became a place not only of survival, but of learning, reflection, and adaptation, where each day reinforced the principles of calm, deliberate attention. Through this slow and steady accumulation of knowledge, skill, and innovation, humans created continuity across generations. Life in the village became both sustainable and adaptable, a balance of effort, observation, and care. Each individual contributed to a subtle legacy, shaping tools, practices, and understanding for those who would follow. The rhythm of work, rest, and reflection ensured that knowledge was preserved, patience was practiced, and life unfolded gently, steadily, and harmoniously across time. The Neolithic village was therefore more than a collection of huts and fields. It was a living classroom, a space of continuity, adaptation, and quiet progress. Every act, every observation, and every innovation contributed to the enduring balance of life. Humans learned that survival, growth, and understanding were cultivated slowly, patiently, and deliberately in harmony with the land, the seasons, and each other. And through this rhythm, the village and all who lived within it grew quietly into a stable, resilient, and thoughtful community prepared for the unfolding cycles of generations yet to come. Legacy, knowledge, and the passage of time. As the Neolithic village matured, life became a delicate balance between continuity and adaptation. Between care for the immediate and preparation for the future, generations of humans had cultivated skills, observations, and knowledge, quietly embedding understanding into the rhythms of daily existence. The legacy of these cumulative efforts was not recorded in formal scripts or monuments, but in the continuity of practice, the structure of communities, and the patient transmission of wisdom from elders to children. Time in the village was measured by cycles, the rising and setting sun, the phases of the moon, the progression of seasons, and the rhythms of plant and animal life. Humans observed these cycles closely, learning subtle patterns, forecasting needs, and planning activities with care. The slow accumulation of such knowledge shaped the calendar of work, rest, and reflection, allowing the village to function efficiently without urgency. Evenings became natural pauses in the day, opportunities to assess, share, and internalize lessons from labor and observation. Children were central to the continuity of knowledge. From their earliest years, they observed elders at work in fields, with tools, or in crafting and tending animals. Instruction was embedded in action rather than verbal explanation. Repetition, patient guidance, and gentle correction allowed skills and understanding to be absorbed naturally. Mistakes were tolerated as part of learning. Successes quietly reinforced the rhythm of life. Over time, each child became a repository of accumulated knowledge, capable of sustaining, refining, and extending the practices of the village. Elders played a pivotal role, not only as repositories of practical knowledge, but also as custodians of cultural and social understanding. They observed changes in the environment, guided adaptation to challenges, and mediated disputes with calm authority. Their presence ensured stability, continuity, and reflection, serving as living bridges between past, present, and future. Storytelling soft, rhythmic, and woven into daily tasks was a crucial medium for transmitting values, experiences, and lessons. Myths, explanations of natural phenomena, and reflections on communal life reinforced the village's collective memory, shaping social cohesion and shared identity. Tools, crafted objects, and structures carried lessons across time. Stones, flints, and wooden implements were refined slowly, reflecting accumulated observation and skill. Pottery preserved not only food but also knowledge about materials, fire, and technique. Shelters, storage, pits, and communal spaces were improved incrementally, responding to subtle changes in climate, soil, and population. Each object, carefully made and maintained, embodied the legacy of generations, silently teaching subsequent villagers the principles of patience, care, and observation. Agricultural knowledge became particularly central. Through centuries of observation and experimentation, humans learned which crops thrived in specific soils, how to rotate fields to maintain fertility, and when to plant or harvest. Techniques for preserving seeds, managing pests, and storing surplus created stability and resilience. These practices reinforced understanding of natural cycles, encouraging patience and foresight. Food security allowed humans to contemplate not only survival but also community, reflection, and subtle innovation. Trade and interaction with neighboring communities continued to shape understanding and adaptation. Exchanges of seeds, tools, and crafted objects introduced new possibilities. Observation guided selective adoption of innovations, ensuring integration without disruption. Social and ecological knowledge flowed slowly between villages, creating networks of trust, collaboration, and mutual support. These networks reinforced the lessons of patience, attention, and cooperation, extending the influence of each village beyond its immediate borders. Ritual, ceremony, and quiet reflection preserved social harmony and reinforced cultural memory. Observances tied to planting, harvest, births, deaths, and seasonal changes created predictable rhythms. Participation embedded values, practices, and understanding into daily life. Rituals were subtle, yet powerful, linking generations, reinforcing community cohesion, and aligning human activity with natural cycles. They provided continuity and calm reassurance, ensuring that each individual understood their role within the broader rhythm of existence. Adaptation was continuous. Humans refined tools, experimented with planting patterns, adjusted animal care, and developed new techniques in response to subtle changes in climate, soil, and resources. These innovations were small, deliberate, and cumulative, creating gradual improvements over decades and centuries. Observation remained central, ensuring that change was measured, informed, and harmonious with established rhythms. Children absorbed these lessons naturally, internalizing not only skills but also the philosophy of careful, patient adaptation. The passage of time became visible in the physical and social landscape. Structures aged gracefully, tools bore signs of repeated repair, and fields reflected centuries of cultivation. Individuals aged alongside their villages, contributing to cycles of care, labor, and observation. Life was measured not by abrupt events, but by the gentle accumulation of experience, continuity, and quiet progress. Sleep, rest, and reflection were integral, anchoring human activity within natural cycles and reinforcing calm, deliberate understanding. Evenings continued to serve as moments of reflection. Fires burned softly, casting long shadows that danced on walls and ground. Conversations were quiet, measured, and imbued with purpose. Knowledge was shared naturally through demonstration, repetition, and subtle storytelling. Children absorbed and participated, forming the next generation of custodians of skill, wisdom, and rhythm. Across huts, fields, and communal spaces, life maintained a steady pulse, guided by observation, care, and patience. Through these cycles of work, observation, and reflection, humans created a resilient and enduring legacy. Knowledge was preserved not in written form, but in action, repetition, and memory. Every tool, vessel, field, and story carried the imprint of generations, teaching calm attention, deliberate effort, and the art of living in harmony with the world. Villages became not only centers of survival, but spaces of reflection, learning, and quiet continuity. By integrating labor, observation, ritual, and social cohesion, humans ensured that life could persist, adapt, and flourish. The lessons of patience, cooperation, and deliberate care were internalized, forming the foundation for future generations. Each day, each cycle of seasons, each interaction reinforced the subtle understanding that survival, growth, and cultural continuity required quiet attention, thoughtful observation, and measured effort. And so, as the sun set on the fields, fires burned low in the village, and humans rested alongside animals, the Neolithic community remained a living testament to the gentle accumulation of knowledge. Through generations, life had become measured, deliberate, and harmonious. Every act of care, every observation, every shared story ensured that continuity endured. Sleep came naturally, minds and bodies aligned with the rhythm of the land, carrying the quiet assurance that life, in its patient unfolding, would continue steadily, deliberately, and peacefully across the passage of time.